Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you so much for joining today's lesson, today's meeting. And yes, guys, I hope you enjoy. My name is Isel, the care teacher. So, in today's lesson, the topic is functions. So, we are revising functions. Right, so we are going to start from the basics, but we are not going to dwell much on that. Right, so um, you learned about operators, functions, and error indicators. Operators allow you to do basic calculations such as addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division. Then we have functions. Functions are used, they are built-in formulas to help you do more advanced calculations. So functions are there to help you do more advanced calculations. And then on the other side, operators are the basic calculations. They allow you to do the basic calculations like addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division. Now let's look at the operators. What do I mean about the operators? When I say operators, I mean something like this. So this column is for operators and the description. And then an example, we have this plus sign that we use to add values together. This one to subtract, the second one, we use the second one to subtract. This one to divide. This one for multiplication, greater. So like this, can you see on this example, on greater, cell B3 is greater than B2. So what is in the cell B3 is greater than B2. I mean, you should know this by now. Let me just I felt like I needed to start here before we go to the functions part. We don't have to dwell on this. You are grade 12s, you know you've been doing this, you know what these signs, what these operators are for. Right, so we have seen the operators, the example, their descriptions, and also the examples made. Now we have the functions. The functions, remember we said functions are there to help us do calculations. So functions consist of go back. So functions help us do more advanced calculations. So functions are there to help us do more advanced calculations. Right, so like the examples of functions. Sorry. Right, before I move to the examples of functions, a function, when you are doing a function, to insert a function in a cell, you know this. First, a function always begins with an equal sign. That one you know. Your grade 12s, you know that. Right? It starts with an equal sign, then comes the function. So if you are doing your calculations, you start with the equal sign, then the function. Okay, so the equal sign, the function name, and then you insert the argument, or you select the argument. What do I mean by that? Right, so here is our three examples. These are examples of functions. These are basic functions: the sum, average, and count. So today I'm going to look at the sum, average, and count. Right? I know many of you know about these three functions. They know how to use them. You've been calculating using these functions since grade 10. Right, so this is simple. Right, so the function, so when you are doing your calculations, your function, it must start with an equal sign, then your function. Type in your function and then it followed by an argument, an argument. Right, so equal sign, function name, and the argument, like here on sum. Example, the first example, sum, equal sign, the equal sign, you can see the equal sign, equal sign, then the function name, and also the argument. All right, so sum is used to calculate a total or to add all the values in a cell range. Like for an example, this function that you see under our example, the sum. So that means this person is calculating, is adding all the values that are there on this cell range, which is B2 to B10. So they are adding the values in this cell range. So sum is used for calculating a total of values. So when you are adding all the values, you are looking for total. What do I mean by that? Let's see. Let's practice how this function works. Guys, this is simple. This is grade 10 work. Right, like here, I opened my Excel spreadsheet. Then now to use sum. Sum is used to add all values in a cell range. Now, if I want to add all these values, I want to see the total. So for me to find the total, I must use the function sum. So sum helps me or will help me find the total of this amount. So I'm adding all these values. Equal sign, and then the sum, the function, which is sum, then the argument. The argument is I want to calculate, I want to add all these values. So this is my cell range. Close and click enter. Now sum, if you click on the cell where you have performed this, you'll see in your formula bar that you have used the sum, or I have used the sum function to calculate the total of these values. So to find, I wanted to add all these values and then come up with a total. So I have used the function sum to find the total. Right, so sum is the first on my list of functions. All right, so today we are practicing or revising how to use these functions. So we're practicing how to use the function sum, how to calculate average, and also how to use the function count. All right, so now this one is average. Average How do you calculate the average? This one, the average function helps you calculate the average of the values that are included in a cell range. The average is determined by calculating the sum of all the values. So this function adds all the values, and then after adding all the values, it then divides the total of those values by the number of cells in the argument. Right, so the average will add all the values in the cell range, and then divide by the number of cells in the argument. Right, now let's see how it works. Okay, right, sorry. Right, so I have used the sum function, and also now I want to use the average function. Hi Ndombi, welcome Ndombi. Today in Ndombi we are looking at the functions that we use on Excel. For today we are still looking at the most basic, the basic ones, which is the sum, the average, and count. Right, so these are the basic functions. Right, so we have practiced how to use this one, which is called sum. Now we are on average. So average, we said average, add all the values and then divide the sum of all the values, or the total of all the values, with the number of cells in the argument. Right. How are you, Ntombi? All right. So to use the average function, let's go to our spreadsheet. Right. So here is my spreadsheet. I have calculated the sum, the total. So sum, when you want to calculate a total of certain values, say you want to add a number of values and then come up with a total, then what you need to do, the function that you need to have to use is the sum function. So every time they ask you to calculate the total, let's say maybe there's a question that says determine the total sales for Brooklyn branch. Like, yeah, we wanted to find the total of sales. To calculate the total of sales, we used sum, because sum adds all the values in a range. So it adds everything. Sum has added these amounts together. Right. So to calculate an average is very easy. Don't have to worry about anything, how Excel calculates it. Don't, just focus on the average. So for average, it's very easy. Every time they ask you to calculate the average, you just say equals average. Simple. Then select the argument. Where do you want it to calculate the average? You select the cell range. Here is our average. Right, so Don't be, if you want to say something or you have a question, just feel free to ask. Say anything that you want to say, like you can share or you can question. It's fine. Any question, you're welcome. Thank you so much for joining. All right, so now the average, right? Now remember, we are still on these three basic functions on Excel, right? So for average, the function to use the function is very easy, just like sum. But with sum, always know when you want to add all values in a cell range, or you want to calculate the total, maybe in a column, or you want to calculate the total of something, you want to add all the values. Every time you must use sum. Yes, okay, then we are done now with average. Let's move to count. Count, this function counts the number of cells that have numerical values in the cell range. Okay, so it only calculates cells that have numerical values. All right, so let's go to, let's see. All right, so we say this one only, so count only calculates cells, it counts, this function counts the number of cells. It counts the number of cells that have numerical values, Right, so now if you want to calculate, if you want to use the function count on this one, sorry, right, so to use this function, to use the function count, all you need to do is say equal, insert the equal sign and look for the function count, just type. Then you see the function, double click, you know this. Right, count, we want to count how many cells on this range, on this cell range. I wanted to count how many cells here, how many cells, to count the number of cells that have a numerical value. So always, please note, always just keep in mind that count only counts the number of cells that have numerical values inside. Right, so if you want to count, if you want to use the count, let's say I use the count function on this column. I use the count function on this column. Will it work? Let's see. No, it says 0. Why? The count function is only used for when you want to calculate cells, the number of cells that contains numerical values inside. But this column, there are no numerical values. Just wait. So the count function won't work. Instead, it will give you 0 because there's 0, there is 0 cells that contains numerical values. Sometimes you'll have a spreadsheet that has numerical values mixed with letters, with cells that contains letters. Let's say this Brooklyn Centurion is mixed up with the amount. Say cell 1 has this amount, and then on this cell there's something different, there's Brooklyn. Let's copy this Brooklyn, control, right? Let's say this, in this row, there's something like this. Now I want to use the count function to count how many cells from this row do have, how many cells that have numerical values in them. Let's count by not using the function. Let's start by counting. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the 6 cells that contains numerical values. This one does not contain, sorry, it doesn't have numerical values in it. Right, so if I use the count function on this cell range, it will give me 6. Yes, so the answer is 6. Right, now let me go back to the first example. Right, I want to use the count function. I want to count how many cells on this column, on this range, how many cells that contains values or numerical values from this column. How many cells that have numerical values? Sorry, so sorry about that. Yeah, but you get what I mean. I want to use the count function on this range. The count function will only count cells that have numerical values inside. Right, so now it gives me 7. Yes, the 7 cells that has numerical values inside. But now I want this answer to be number 7, but not 7 range. How do I change it? How do I change this number? The cell, can you see the cell? The settings in this cell are, the cell is in a currency format. So we need to format this cell in order to find a number. So we need to change this cell to number because we are looking for a number. We are calculating how many cells from this range, how many cells that contains numerical values inside. So we have 7 cells. Still, this is not what I am looking for. I want it to be a whole number. A whole number, whole number. A whole number. To change this into a whole number, I should go back to my home tab again. Home tab for me to format or change the format of this cell. Home tab, number. In the number group, I have number there on top, but now I want it to be a whole number. What can I do? I can do this by clicking on the decrease decimal, or I can click on the drop down list. There's a drop down menu. Open the menu and change these decimal places. So my number here has 2 decimal places. I want it to be a whole number. So to change this into a whole number, I should put it at 0. Right, let me do it again. To change this, I can decrease the decimal, or I can click on the drop down menu in the number group, home tab, number group, then say whole number. So for it to be a whole number, it has to have 0 decimal places. Then here is my answer. We have 7 cells that contains numerical values. Right, so today we have revised on how to calculate a total, how to calculate an average, and also how to use the count function. When you are using your count function, you are looking for, or you are calculating the number of cells that contains numerical values in a range. Did you see the answer at first? The answer at first, it was 7 ranges. We changed the format of this cell. It was currency before, but then we changed it to a number because we were looking for a number. Then the number gave us 2 decimal places. The number was in 2 decimal places. We changed that by decreasing the decimals. It's up to you. But when you are asked to decrease the decimals, you can just click on decrease decimal, or click on, there's a drop down menu next to number. Click on this and then this drop down menu will pop up. After you see the drop down the drop down menu will have options. Now you want number, but at first you had 2 decimals, so it was looking like this. It was 2 decimals. Now we wanted a whole number. We changed that to 0, and then we say okay. So that's how you calculate your total, average, and use the count function. That's great 10 work, but I felt like I had to revise, or just to give you or remind you about these functions, so that when we move to the round up, and round down functions, you will know what we are on. Right, so before going to the round up, round down, and round function, I felt like starting here. Right, so we go back to my slide. Okay. Now, I want you to look at these functions, Tombi, and tell me what you can see. Right, so here on this function, it seems like we have lost Ntombi, right? So on this activity, I want you to guess what these functions will return. So I want your answers to be like this. Say, for instance, you were not given a spreadsheet. You just have to guess the answers for these cells. I'm not asking you how many for the answer. Let's say, like for instance, on this one, guess what these functions will return. So my answer was, if the function is sum, the argument was B2 and B10. So this person was calculating the total of, the person was adding all values in the cell range B2 and B10. So between B2 and B10, the person used this function to calculate or to add all values that are on cell B2 up until B10. So Person was adding all the values in the cell range B2 and B10. Now I want you to think about that. If I type in something like this, what will this function return? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So this function will calculate the number of cells that contains numerical values inside on the cell range B2 and B10. So from B2 until B10, this function will calculate how many cells has numerical values inside. Now, the average, think about it. What will this function return? What will this function return? Equals average B2 and B10. This function will add the values of the cells B2 up until B10 and then divide the total. It will add all the values in this range. So all the values that are on the cells B2 up until B10. So it will add how much, or add the amount that is there, add all the values in this cell range, and then divide this values, the total of these values, with the number of the cells included in this function. Like for instance, here on average, this function added all these values, and then after finding the total of these values, it divided these values with the number of cells. So how many cells did it find? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 cells. Let me try. I want to see something. 758. Wait, sorry. 758. Oops. 7, 8, and 9 by 7. Right, so one mistake I made, there's no equals sign. Right, so let me do like this. So equals this cell. The cell contains an amount of 758,350. Sorry, 758,353 rands. Okay, so I want to divide this amount with 7. Oops. Divide with this. All right, so to calculate this average, the average function added all these values, and then after finding the total of this value, the total is 758,353. So, okay, so by dividing this with so it went like 700. It added all these values, and then the total was 758,353, and then it divided this total with 7, because there's 7 cells. That's how it came up with this answer. So that's how this answer was found. Yes, so yes, guys, that's it. Remember, total, with calculating the total, we used sum, and we also used average for calculating the average. We used the average function. Then we used the count function to calculate the number of cells that includes or that has numerical values inside. Sorry. So this lesson was to actually remind you of these functions, and just to put your mind back to the functions topic, so that you will be ready for the topics, for the functions that we will discuss tomorrow, which are the range, the round function, round up, and round down. So these are the basics. You've done this in grade 10, so there's no need for me to look at these functions or dwell on these functions, because you know. And the reason why we are revising, it's because we have a test next week. On the 30th of July, we have a test, but these ones are not going to be tested. My point here is I was making you guys ready for the next one, or just to put your mind on the function, to remind you about the functions. I did not want to just jump into the round up, and round down. Wanted to bring these ones up first and then move to the round up, round function, and the round down function. All right, so there's more. We have more functions. We have more functions that we did in grade 10 and grade 11. But my point was to just help you guys, or remind you guys about the function, just to put your mind on the topic functions before I just jump into the round up, round down, and the round function. Right, I hope you get my point. Right, so tomorrow we are moving to the round down, and round up functions, which you have done these functions, or you have learned about these functions in term one. So today it was just me revising on these functions, and even tomorrow I'm revising on the round down, round up, and round functions, because of the test. The round up, and round down functions might be on the test, but these ones, they're not going to be on the test. Okay, so yes, guys, that's it for today. I have the activity. You saw the spreadsheet I was working on right now to calculate the sum, the average, and the count function. I used this. This is a link to that spreadsheet. So if you want to practice those, you can use this link, and then just go back and see if you still remember how to use this function. This is very easy. This is very easy. Yeah, and guys, please be ready for tomorrow. Tomorrow we are doing the round up, and round down. Yes. So I hope tomorrow you will be ready. You practice before the lesson, so that when um, you practice before the lesson, and then when we are discussing those functions together or revising on those functions together, you will have um, an idea, or you will remember how to use those functions or how those functions work. All right, so yeah, thank you so much, guys. That's it for today's lesson, and I hope you enjoyed. See you tomorrow. See you tomorrow, guys. Thank you so much.